The doctor is to be feared more than the disease. Hi, I'm John Rose. That's a Latin proverb. And I can't think of a more appropriate way to start this video because I'm going to take a closer look at the lessons that we can learn from this coronavirus pandemic that's taking place all around our planet. Today is Saturday, March 28th, 2020. I warned about this 4 years ago in one of my videos. 21st century pandemics and world wars. It's easy to be a prophet if you have access to history. The problem is we don't have access to history, and that's why history repeats itself. But there's a valuable lesson that we need to learn to take away from this coronavirus. I'm a firm believer in making the best out of everything that comes around. Powers that be take a crisis. If they don't create it, they're still going to take advantage of it. But in most cases, they create it like the one we're having right now. But the most important lesson that we can understand right now, that we can take away from this whole crisis that we're going through, is that our current medical system has to be challenged. And I propose we do that on two main points that are undeniably proving that these people don't have any right to have a monopoly on an industry that shouldn't even exist. The main thing we should look at, and we should have them help us, so make a list, guys, of all of the diseases you have, and then make a list and separate those according to how many of those you don't know the cause. And guess what? The vast majority, probably 90% of what you guys claim, or what you guys have as part of your stock and trade for your business, you openly admit cause unknown. But you can't say that all the time, can you? Of course not. You'd look extremely ridiculous. You still do now if you have anybody really scrutinize what you're doing. But you can't say cause unknown all the time, so that's why you say germs, genes, and old age for maybe 10% of the time. Maybe 10% of the time, you're actually doing something we need you for. When we've had an accident and something's out of our control and we're damaged and we need you to save our lives, there is a time and a place in emergency crises to have that type of intervention. But virtually everything else you're doing is treating symptoms that are lifestyle related. So make up that list, folks. Most of what you're doing, you admit you don't know. Now, why are we taking any advice? Why are we listening to anybody who admits they don't know the cause to most of our diseases? And in other situations, they say it's old age. That's just old age. All old people get sick. That's not true. It's not how old you are. It's how you've been living. And then the genes, well, genes will determine how a symptom will manifest, but not if, unless there's a genetic defect. Most of us simply just have genetic weaknesses, and that's how it enters into the picture. Chain breaks at its weakest link, right? So what happens when we don't live properly? We're going to have a symptom show up where we have a weakness. But then it's the germs. That's where they really get us, folks. The germ theory of disease fell flat on its face a long time ago, and that's why they came up with this virus theory to explain everything. And I already know that this is virtually impossible to challenge people's belief system, especially now that they bombard our brain with this exercise they've been going through, making us fear the virus. We fear the virus more than anything else, don't we? And that's what they capitalize on. Remember, the Hegelian problem, reaction, solution. The reaction they want is us to have fear so we accept their solution. What we don't want to do, folks, is react with fear. We need to go straight from the problem to the solution. The problem is we're being scared to death of this bogus coronavirus pandemic. And the solution is, let's evaluate the medical system and see if they have a right telling us this. And it turns out, most of what they're doing, they say cause unknown. And the other point we need to look at, there's 2 points. One is, look at all the things they admit they don't know. And then the other thing is, let's take a closer look at the vaccines and how, especially the ones that you guys claim eradicate all those diseases, most of which were simply diseases of filth, that we knew that. So that's the 2 most important things we need to pay attention to. They admit they don't know the cause, and vaccines are easily proven not to have eradicated any of those diseases that they supposedly eradicated. All of them except polio were diseases of filth. Polio was mainly caused from DDT, a neurotoxin that they were spraying on our food. Paralyzed us. It's a neurotoxin. Once again, folks, the doctor is to be feared more than the disease. Voltaire long ago said, doctors are men who prescribe drugs of which they know little to cure diseases of which they know less, and human beings of whom they know nothing. Now it's gotten even worse. Today we have like 130 specialists. You go to your main doctor, your general practitioner, whatever you want to call him nowadays, and he looks at you and he sends you off to a specialist. Got 130 of these specialists. And what are they going to do? They're going to test you, send their test off to some more doctors, pathologists. These are the doctors' doctors. Pathologists work with doctors. They don't work with patients. And when patients, and then doctors, they don't work with patients either. They don't know the cause. That's why they don't know the cause. They're looking at the effects. Look at the pathologist. What do you do if you become a pathologist? You go looking for clues. Remember, there's 3 stages of knowledge, folks. Thoughts, actions, reactions, beliefs, causes, effects, belief system, lifestyle choices, feedback system, things we do are things we think in the first stage, the things we do or have done to us in the second stage, things we get in the third stage. If you're a pathologist, you look for clues in the third stage of knowledge. Already you guys are guilty of what's known as modus ponens. That's putting the cart before the horse for a problem that's within your control. So when we use logic, there's 2 tests everyone has to pass in order to use logic. One has to do with the contents or the specifics of the details. That's a very complicated test. We never want to start there, but that's what they're going to try to drag us into. The other test is the structure test. So when we use logic, we think of it this way, is that the structure test is like the railroad tracks, and it's one direction, one way, and then the contents, the specifics, the details are the railroad cars on top. Don't get tricked into looking at those. Don't go looking for logical fallacies in those. Let's see if the structure is valid. And it turns out, in the case of our current medical system, it's invalid. So throw them out right off the bat. Why? What do pathologists do? They look for clues in the third stage of knowledge, the effects. And they go, oh my God, look at all these. They're causes. No, they're consequences. The virus is a consequence. The bacteria is a consequence. They're the cause. Why? Because we can't say we don't know all the other times. They're there at the scene of the crime, so to speak, like the skid marks are at car accidents. According to their thinking, we blame all of our car accidents on the skid marks. That's how pathologists work. So pathologists, the people who diagnose our diseases, are so far removed from what the patient is doing. Even the doctors, the general P, the GP, is far removed from the actual patient. Then the specialist is even one more step far removed. Then you've got the pathologist, who actually is the one doing the diagnosing. They're one more step far removed. And then how do they identify this virus that's killing us? The 2 tests that they use are totally not even inaccurate, but they're insane to think they work. Using the PCR test or the ELISA test, whether we're going to look at molecular markers or antibodies rather, that's no proof the virus exists. When these virus hunters went out looking for the virus, they couldn't find it, so that's when they created these molecular markers. You got to look at what pathologists do to actually label you've got a coronavirus. Let's use the PCR test. What's the first stage in the PCR test? Well, we can't see enough of those, so let's amplify them. First step, let's increase the temperature to 94 degrees Celsius. That's 201.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Almost got it to boiling. Let's derange this whole bunch and double the amount of numbers. And we'll keep doing it till we have billions of them. They're looking at things that are altered to begin with. And it's not the virus they're looking at. It's what they call this magical molecular marker. It signifies there's a virus. Or we use the amount of antibodies you got in your body. If you got the antibody, that means you've got the virus. It's all poppycock, folks. And I know how hard that is for the average person to overcome. So when we challenge our current medical system, forget the whole idea whether or not anything's contagious. That's too difficult for the average person to wrap their brain around. Look at the two simple facts. Number one, most of what they're doing, they admit they don't know. And then number two, vaccines never eradicated anything. I've already shown graphs, and I'll put links down below in a pinned document where you can go to a website and look at these vaccine graphs that prove that all of those diseases that were supposedly eradicated by vaccines were on a steady decline every decade, because we figured out the problem. It was a plumbing problem. It was poor sanitation. It was filth. That's what's getting us. Either we got too much filth inside of us and it's backing up, or there's filth outside of us and it's coming into us. It all boils down to having things inside of us that don't belong there. It's not complicated, folks. But when you don't know where to look, you don't realize that most of our problems are coming from the other side of the cell. Remember, our body does about a bunch of cells, and then we have two main fluids. One fluid is like a kitchen that feeds it, that's the blood. The other is like a bathroom, it's the lymph system. It cleans the cells, because everything that eats eliminates, so the cells eat from the blood and then they eliminate into the lymph system. When that lymph system isn't functioning properly and doesn't get filtered properly, it's going to back up and it goes into different places. And when it does, that's when they start naming what they got. That's when they bring in the pathologists and they go, oh, what can we find? Look at the clues. Well, most of the clues are the consequences. Wherever waste matter is, so is bacteria. So of course you're going to find bacteria. So automatically they label it an infection. How do they trick our so-called experts? It's easy. You get them to think right off the bat, you know the cause, it's an infection. That's why we have to challenge this ultimate false belief that there is no such thing as an infection that's causing the problem. In most cases, it's our own waste matter that's backing up, and everywhere waste matter goes, so does the bacteria. It's the consequence. It's one of those clues they've identified, but then they think it's causing it. And why? Because they're too far removed from the person who's living poorly and making poor lifestyle choices, or is living in a bad environment, which a lot of people do in third world countries to this day. We still have these diseases of filth occurring in third world countries because they're plumbing problems. In other countries, we experienced it when we got real big and from the Industrial Revolution moved into cities, we weren't dealing with our waste matter. The opposite happened when the Roman Empire was conquered in the West and the East about 1,000 years apart. They came in, destroyed the aqueducts and the sewage system, and the plague broke out. It wasn't the bacteria that was the problem, it was the filth. And with the filth comes the bacteria, and what do the pathologists do? They go, looking for clues, we found them, the bacteria did it. And the viruses, there's some dead cells, we can do some sequencing, we can amplify this solution and identify it and call it a virus. And yet, they've never seen it, they've never taken a picture of a virus. Whenever they look at it from through a microscope, it's a frozen image, folks. You can't see a life cycle of anything doing anything to anything. So let's turn this crisis into an opportunity for all of us. We need to seriously figure out a way to break this monopoly that our current medical system has, as well as all the bureaucracies that were set up to protect it. The CDC, the FDA, the USDA, the EPA, on and on. Remember the SCS? I've mentioned before in other videos. If you're not familiar with it, check it out and look for Michael McKibben. These guys discovered them. Seniors Executive Services. About 1,000 government employees that are in 75 main bureaucracies, or the head of these bureaucracies, and these bureaucracies are then used to protect people in bad places. And I go into much depth in my previous video about natural solutions for everything, including pandemics, by showing you the Fabian connection. And the Fabians, a long time ago, understood they got to, in order to take down America, they got to do it through our bureaucracies. So we need to do something, folks, about these agencies that are in charge right now. We got to take away their power. They don't have any right with as much power as they have and then the ability to destroy our whole society. For you guys who want to really understand the conspiracy angle of this, read Eustace Mullen's book, Murder by Injection. He knows the medical conspiracy involved. He knows how much power the medical community has and how much harm and damage they can do what they're doing to us right now. Remember, my channel is all about two main things: our health and our wealth. Powers that be want us to be sick and they want us to be poor. And this latest crisis right now is illustrating exactly what they're trying to do. We need to wake up and unite and question the systems that are in charge. How can the evidence presented right now not prove that they don't have any right doing what they're doing? They've openly lied and said the vaccines eradicated these diseases, and we can prove that easily. We can also prove that they're not qualified because they openly admit they don't know. Now let's take a look at the harm they do. They're the number one cause of death in America. They did their own study a long time ago. They said we're the third, and then they did it again with still extremely conservative numbers, and you were way up there, number one. That's why when you guys go on strike, the death rate drops. Everything in our society, folks, revolves around our health, or more specifically, the lack of it. That's why the powers that be control everything related to our health. That's why our doctors don't know anything. That's why they got us into this coronavirus crisis. Our nutritionists don't know anything. That's why there's so much confusion around nutrition. Please watch my previous video. I'll put a link down below, Natural Solutions, where I start off with that great Norman Dodd interview, explaining how the powers that be knew they had to control our historians, to control history. They do the same thing with our doctors and our nutritionists and every other area where they can control what we think. So please stop reacting with fear. Problem, reaction, solution. Forget the fear. Get excited. Look at the problem we have. Look what they're trying to do to us. Look how they're destroying us. What's the solution? Let's challenge our current medical system. I guarantee you the day we challenge them and get rid of them, ow! We're all in for a treat.